Hello, I'm Matthew, and I teach you the skilled techniques to do whatever you want with flowers. What goes with flowers? Parties. So I also teach you the skills of great entertaining. And I always try to do it keeping in mind manageability and affordability, because if it crushes our mind and our budget, the party has missed the point. So what do I have for you today? First of all, welcome to my kitchen here in Kentucky. I'm Matthew, and happy holidays, however you do or don't celebrate. Boy, come what may, we have made it through another year, and this has been a challenging one. How has your year been? Mine has been tough. As you see, my hair is uncut and my fingernails are worn down. That's basically the state of things now, but that doesn't mean we should abandon the opportunities to gather with the people that make us happy to be alive. So, for the holidays, and frankly, for the whole rest of the year, today I have an idea for you. It is a great cheese board. How to do it. It is one of my most requested subjects since I came onto YouTube. Specifically, how to make a cheese board that doubles as your centerpiece. So that's what we're going to do. And I will start by saying that some people, it is very popular, it's all over social media now, they will make a cheese board, a charcuterie board, a binge board, whatever you call it. And it completely covers the dining table or the kitchen island, whatever, and everything is falling off the edges. And it is a horror vacui of excess. Very often, none of it particularly thoughtfully chosen. We are not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to propose a thoughtful, nicely curated, interesting, exciting cheese board that gives you some flexibility not only with how you do it, but the budget you have and how you can stretch what you can spend to make the most of it for still a very impressive cheese board. And it is inspired by the best cheese boards I have ever eaten, which weren't so much cheese boards as they were what I'm about to tell you. So one thing I will probably start telling you more about next season is my deep French connections. But suffice to say for this story that I spent a lot of time as the practically resident guest with a French family and their fabulous cafe. And very often, there was a woman who was a friend of the family's, and I knew her a little bit through them. And her job was extremely interesting and pretty unusual. She worked for an art museum, and when the museum lent their works of art, their paintings, sculptures, whatever, when they lent them out to other galleries for exhibits, she would travel with the art, and she would make sure that all the terms that had been agreed were met and that the art was safe and so on. And so she would come back and she would bring, because she traveled with the art, she did not travel in commercial air. She traveled back with the art, which gave her some flexibility, and she would always bring a cooler packed with the most fabulous cheeses from wherever she'd been. And she always came to the restaurant very late after the restaurant had finished dinner service that night, and all the little hairs on my arms are standing up remembering it. And boy, those meals were some of the magic moments of my life. But the whole staff would gather, and certainly the family of the restaurant, and in the darkened dining room, we would push the tables together and have a huge family meal with all of these cheeses as the centerpiece down the middle of the table, with little votive candles sort of lighting our travel through the experience of all of those different cheeses. So that's the inspiration for this cheese board I'm going to give you today. I encourage you to keep that idea of a traveling adventure, because a good cheese board is an adventure. It's exciting. It is a trip of discovery through many different flavors and textures and so on. So without a lot of further ado, I'm going to bring out some cheese. I'm also going to give you my guide for the main points to keep in mind, and then we're going to make a cheese board. See you then. Let's make a cheese board. So here's the plan. Very often we do these things, those of us that have been doing them for a long time, and we don't even realize all the steps we follow or the things we think about. So I made a list so I don't forget to tell you anything. The thing I want to do first, I don't want to be boring and just read, but I want to talk you through the main points. Don't worry, I will put all of it down in the article that I published to Substack as well. I have no idea what I'll title it yet, but it will be obvious that it's the article about the cheese board. I will also link it to the film. After I give you the main points, then I will talk you through the ingredients and the equipment that I have out here. Equipment meaning serveware, bowls, cheese knives, etc. I will also tell you about this fabulous marble board and how you can find them at great prices. And then we'll just simply build the cheese board. So, my guide to making fabulous cheese boards. 1. Shop the sales. Everyone does it, even in Europe. If you go out and you start buying cheeses left and right without looking at the cost, you will very quickly realize that you have several $100s of cheese in your basket. If that is within your budget and that makes you happy, go right ahead. But a lot of us can't necessarily afford to do that all the time. So what I will say is you might, and I'll tell you more about this when we get to the cheese, one strategy to stretch your budget is shop the cheeses that are offered at discounted prices that you will eat quickly, because you're not going to store them for a long time, and then save a portion of your budget for one cheese that is really special, that's really worth splurging on. It's like that old rule by Inez de la Fressange, the fashion model. She always said, spend half your budget on basic foundational staple garments and spend the other half on accessories and things that make them all mix and match together and look sparkly. I'm paraphrasing, that was not exactly what she said, but you get the idea. So shop the sales. Next, include at least one cheese that most people will love. Something safe, not necessarily boring. Please don't be boring. But some people will be more adventurous than others. So always include something like a good cheddar, like maybe a brie that is not particularly challenging, something that a lot of people will enjoy. 3, include something unexpected that most people will be excited to try. I've got a great example of that here when I introduce the cheeses. Part of the fun of a cheese board is learning and discovering, and sometimes the door to getting people to that is to offer something that surprises them. I didn't think I'd like that, but I was curious. It piqued my imagination. And now I have a cheese I like. That's a wonderful thing to give someone. That's a great gift. Let's see. Next. Include variety. That's a variety of cheeses. That's a variety of flavors, strong and mild, textures. Also include fresh, non-dairy options. Maybe people have delicate digestion, maybe people have certain health concerns. Variety is great. Include something local. It makes for a wonderful taste of your place where you are. Very often the cheeses are not from our immediate place. If they are, marvelous. The thing that I'm including today that's local is this honey, this fabulous, funky, semi-dark honey that comes from my family's apiary in Illinois. Include something local. It's a good point of conversation, too. Consider ease of eating. What do I mean? I mean that if you're offering a cheese board on a buffet, that is different than offering a cheese board at a seated dinner. And you could adapt what I'm showing you today to a buffet, certainly, but I've envisioned it for a seated dinner. I hope it will be obvious why as we go, but certainly if you're going to use it as your centerpiece, that implies a seated dinner, and I'm going to encourage you to do so. Serve condiments. That's my next suggestion. I'm offering honey today, But when I say serve condiments, I generally avoid things that might drip too much. And the preciousness of your linen or your tabletop might dictate how risky you want to be with your condiments. A thick honey, certainly like a whipped honey or a jam, maybe a mustard, fine. But things that are really thin and drippy I would avoid, particularly if they're a dark color that would stain your furniture or your linens. Provide appropriate utensils. We'll talk about that as we go. But cheese, cocktail picks, cheese knives, I meant to say, cocktail picks, spoons, etc. You don't want people having no choice except picking up the flatware from their place setting on the shared, to take from the shared cheese board. So solve that problem before it starts. We are only 2 more to go. Good cheese boards are an adventure, as I said, make it exciting. I hope you can see here the variety, not only of the ingredients we're choosing from, but our containers make it visually exciting. Think about color, and I'll have some words about that as we go too. Last of all, organize your cheese board in zones. It is important to have a main idea. I'm putting my hands in no particular place, but each idea has a defined area, which you don't want to do. And it is something you often see in these gargantuan displays of food that I'm sure most is thrown out at the end. You know, they just sort of sprinkle everything everywhere, and it's like a confetti. And it's very important to organize in zones so that the people eating your cheese board can understand what you are offering them. So, if you want to know more about any of those, or refer to them again, of course you can rewind the film, but also just have a look on Substack. With that, I'm going to talk you through the ingredients, and then we will do the equipment. What have I here? Let's do the cheeses first. I have a fabulous triple cream Saint-Andre. It is clearly a mold ripened cheese, and a mold rind cheese that is ripened, I mean to say. And it's delicious and very rich. I have an Alpine Young Swiss. And here's what I was saying, something that is maybe unfamiliar but exciting to people. This is a cheddar, but it's made from goat's milk. So that's interesting. That's similar but new for many people. Then I have a Mountain Gorgonzola from northern Italy. I have Humboldt Fog, which is a blue-veined cheese made of goat's milk from California. And a call back to earlier in the season, I have something very local. It was made right here in this kitchen. It is our cheese ball from a few weeks ago. And I think you'll find it an interesting counterpoint in all of these things. Be highbrow, have wonderful things, but do not take yourself too seriously. I think it shows a wonderful confidence and not taking yourself too seriously, not pretentious attitude when you can include something like that among the finery. The high with the low, that's the key to real style. Okay, so food beyond cheese. We have some dried fruit. I have Medjool dates. I have some dried Smyrna figs. I have some fabulous young radishes, and I hope you can see they are in 3 or 4 colors. And I've left just a graze of the top, and when they had the tails, I left them. They're just washed and cut in half lengthwise, and it's very easy because you can put a piece of cheese on this and eat it in maybe 2 bites. So this serves as a kind of vehicle. I have grapes, red, black, and green. They are seedless. I like to serve them cold. It does slightly mute the flavor, but it emphasizes their freshness. On the point of temperature, I would serve everything at room temperature. I would cut the cheese as much as you need to in its cold refrigerated state, but leave it to warm to room temperature 3 or 4 hours once it's on the board. You don't want to have to style it once it warms up. But a lot of people experience cheese as an epiphany when they eat it at the appropriate temperature, which is very rarely cold. Certainly for the things we're doing here, room temperature is better. So what else do I have? In this beautiful Waterford bowl, I have Castelvetrano olives. Those are those sort of grassy, vegetal, extremely buttery olives. Even olive lovers, people who are not olive lovers, excuse me, love Castelvetranos. Then I have, as I said, this big jar of honey, and you'll say, but that jar is full of crystallization. The honey is still liquid, and this is part of its story. So I don't want to, like I said, high and low, I don't want to take something that's so beautifully rustic and fuss it up so much that that charm is lost. At the same time, I don't want the whole effect to be so rustic that it does not seem thoughtful. I have some walnut halves, and you have many options of what sort of nuts to serve. The best suggestion I can make is to serve the best quality you can get your hands on and be sure they're fresh. Nuts go rancid very quickly on shop shelves or even on your shelf at home. Make sure they're not rancid. Halves are nice instead of small pieces. Could you serve just a dry roasted or even a raw nut? Yes. Could you serve salted roasted nuts? Yes. Quality matters more than variety per se, though I'm not sure peanuts would be the most appropriate in this particular combination. We have here some beautiful small, sort of slightly darker than Hermes orange peppadew peppers that have been pickled in brine. We have some fabulous, I hope you can see them glistening, semi-dry apricots. And they're not that lurid orange that you sometimes get. They have been treated to preserve their color, but not luridly so. And last of all, some crystallized ginger, and it's a very, very good quality. It's spicy and yet sweet and refreshing and can really pick you up and clean your palate from one cheese to the other. So, I do have another little bit of equipment to hand. I've got various ramekins. I've even got an old teacup and a tiny little bowl, almost a finger bowl, maybe a little fruit bowl. And I might decide to use some of these and I might not as we build the board. One thing to think about, if your olives have pits, if your dates have pits, if there's anything that needs to be discarded, something like a teacup or one of these small bowls, this would be just fine. Something like this would be very good for the pits. You have to give someone a place to put the pits. And if you don't, heavens knows where you'll find them. I say that from the voice of experience. What else should I say about all of this? Well, I'll probably think of more as we go. On to the equipment. Of course, you'll want to have kitchen knives and things to work with your cheese. But in terms of serving, I've got some of these charming little, I say stainless steel, but they have a look like they might even be silver plate. My mother bought these recently at an estate sale, and I found them while she was away, so I'm using them. I don't know their story, other than she came up with them at an estate sale. So I have several of those. I have several of these French cheese knives, and I've got them here in two sizes. I've got them in the small size and the large size, and they've got the classic little bee motif at the handle. I have some of these vintage knives that would be very good for a heartier cheese. You can cut in and either move it to your plate with the point or spread it. For something extremely soft, I have essentially like a stainless steel butter knife. And similar in another pattern, this is Oneida, Louisiana is the name of that pattern. Then I've got in the same Louisiana, because it's kind of fancy but not too over the top, and this is old enough that it's got a bit of the shine rubbed off, which I thought would be nice for this look. I've got spoons in the same Louisiana pattern. I've got a few other mix-match spoons, including a Louisiana sugar spoon, and this is actually one of my baby spoons, but it might be good for a small olive or something at the table. And again, there's a story. If we use this, there's a story. Uh, okay, so there is everything. Oh, and I do have a lemon and a peeler, and I will show you why as we go. So, the board. I did not buy this as a cheese board. In fact, I did not buy this at all, but I buy these occasionally, and I do not buy them as cheese boards. I saw them in an expensive kitchen shop recently at eye-popping prices. What I do is I go to flea markets and brocants and such, and I find old, broken down, usually Victorian, late Victorian tables, and they have very often perfectly good marble tops. And the furniture is in a pitiful state, so I offer them a very low price, practically, just give them something to take it away, because no one else is going to buy it. And I throw out the table because it has no value, it's not worth restoring, but I get the top. But, $40, $50, $65, something like that for a nice piece of marble in good condition without a lot of mars or stains. That's great. In fact, recently, I was in a kind of a junk shop out in the yard beside the building, and I saw they had a whole stack of them, and I've not gone back to make them an offer, but I might. I have, squares, rounds, ovals, the shapes of tabletops. I also have, for a very large buffet, a piece of the slab stone that was used to make these kitchen countertops. And I had just a long enough piece to have the whole edge trimmed for an incredibly long cheese board. It is so long I store it under a sofa. So a little bit of ingenuity goes a long way. And when I say that a key part of entertaining, I mentioned this earlier in the season, I'll mention it again, it comes from the Escriba family chocolatier in Barcelona. It is a great idea to, with all entertaining, all design, excite, surprise, and use unforgettable, irrepeatable moments and experiences for your guests. These are the things that people remember. They're the things that stand out because not everyone does them. And when you use a tabletop as a cheese board, now this is not the top of your table, this sits on your table, I want to be clear. But that's out of the ordinary. People take note. Maybe they even learn and do the same thing themselves. So the only other thing I'll add about the board itself is be sure your table can withstand the weight. This board is heavy. It's at least 1 or 1.5 centimeter thickness of solid marble, and that has some weight. Do not use this on a table that might tip or on a glass top table that's already a little bit unstable. A lot of people will press up on a table to stand up from their chair, and if that would make your marble board unstable, just don't do it. Save your marble board for another purpose. Okay, so all of that said, how are we going to go about building the cheese board? I would think about it a little bit like the top of a domed bouquet. We want more height in the middle, but we also don't want slopes that are perfectly even all the way down. We want hills and valleys and interest all the way around. And my idea about this big centerpiece is that it's a big piece of cheese. So we could cut it, and I think I probably will, but when I do, I have a choice to make. Am I going to cut it and use its two halves separately? Or am I going to use it stacked to give me some height? Either way, people have to be able to cut from it and serve themselves. So what else do I have that will have some height? Let's see. I also encourage you to build this sort of board on the table where you will serve it. Don't make it beautiful in your kitchen and have to slide it off your countertop and cross your fingers and toes while you hope it'll make it to the table. Make it right on the table where you will serve it. Again, always mind your linen. So this is height. My honey gives some height. And I'll put it here where you can see that beautiful ball jar. And I think what I will do, I think I'm going to cut this diagonally. that. This was a bit of an extravagance, but with cheese like this, you'll never have any regret. Now, look at that. Marvelous. I'm not going to put this right in the middle. I'm going to save the middle for something else. So I'm going to, let's just see. I'm not sure yet. It's a journey of discovery together. I could stand this up really dramatically, but that's going to be hard for people to work with. So what I could do is this. I'll do it this way so you can see it. I think that's very nice. So if this was on a Lazy Susan, I would turn it. And I'm thinking of the composition overall, but I hope you can see that. That's interesting. And whether people cut from this piece or this piece, they have no problem at all. Now, the other pieces basically just get put around. I always put the cheese first before I do other things. So I will work them in. This is clearly the bottom of the Swiss. So I will put that, let's just say here. I'm going to put all of these near enough inside the perimeter that when people cut, the knife or the cheese does not slide down the side of the board. And I will say a word about, I'm thinking about color too, by the way. I don't want things to get too monotone in any one grouping. You know, don't put all the pale cream colored cheeses together. Break them up. I had a point I wanted to make. Well, it'll come back to me. And actually, I'm going to move this over a little bit to make some room. Which way do I like this one? I think this one looks good like this. We'll just make a little room for him there. And this other blue, I might be inclined to put it toward the back, but since you couldn't see it, I'm going to stand him here and look at that. You can see him just oozing along. And because I want you to be able to see this, I think I'm going to make it slightly less symmetrical than I ordinarily would. And I'm going to put this on the front. Now, I'm going to cut a few slices in here, which means walking around to the other side of the table, and I don't want to offend you with my back. So, I'll be right back and I'll show you what I've done. Welcome back. It's getting exciting. At least it is for me. I hope for you too. So, we pick up right where we left off. You see, I just sliced a little bit of this, I call it a cheese ball. I suppose it's really a log, but that sounds a bit unappetizing. And you can see, maybe, let me turn this slightly, that this Humboldt fog is just beginning to ooze a little bit. And I've turned that to show you. I'm going to turn it back. It's a little rough. I hope I'm not scraping my table. I turn that to show you because that's the sensuality of what we're doing. And you've really got to be in touch with your sensuality to do this nicely. Not that it needs to become indecent. But when people eat this, I have to say from serving it many, many times, they go slightly wild. And let me give you a note about planning your menu. If you have offered a generous cheese board, and you put it in the middle of your table as your centerpiece, which I propose you do, either put it at a table where everyone sitting around the table can reach it equally, and does not have to climb over other people to get to it. Because this is a grazing kind of food. People will have a slice of this, and a slice of that, and 2 tastes of that, and an olive, you see. So if you can't position it so that everyone can reach it relatively equally and comfortably, then simply use multiple cheese boards down your table. And if you were doing, for example, a wedding at a big communal table, a big feast, I don't see any reason why your cheese boards would even all have to be the same. The shapes could be different as long as they were unified with a relatively similar stone. Similarly, if the stones were different, maybe all the shapes are relatively similar. do not feel that everything must always match, match, match. That's never interesting. That's not surprising. That doesn't spark the vital interest of people to explore further. Um, and also, I will say, before we proceed, on the topic of using a board like this as your centerpiece, that serve something else first, but something light, like a green salad with just a vinaigrette. Just beautifully washed and dried, lightly vinaigrette-dressed greens. And maybe would be a nice idea to have a little bit of dried fruit in the salad, but of a different kind than you're offering on the board. And while people eat it, the first course, they will be admiring this cheese board, salivating. And for years, I made the mistake of serving a board like this as a first course. And people would have such an opulent enjoyment of the cheese that by the time the main course came, they said, I would have been perfectly happy with just the cheese. So you've got some effort, you've spent the money. Keep that in mind when you plan your menu. You might do something like, I'm completely making this up, but let's say for Christmas, you want it to feel special. A light salad with a bit of citrus. That's generally in season in the Western world for winter months. And it's also light. And then you move on to your cheese board, and then after that you might have maybe something braised but kind of light, maybe a roast but not particularly rich, and certainly not with big heavy cream sauce. There are a lot of things you could do, but keep the portion smaller and the sauce lighter and the accompaniments not too rich. And then certainly if you've had a cheese board like this, instead of having it in the middle of the meal, it could be dessert, or it could precede dessert. But if you do that, in any case, not too heavy and not too creamy on the dessert, something light, maybe fruity or citrusy. With that said, I think the next thing we will do is add the grapes. Now, you always have a choice with grapes. My selection was limited, and it's lovely to have big clusters of them, but that's not always what you get. So, how can I work these in? I want them to fall naturally. Let's see if I can put them here. Let's see. That probably looks just fine. I'll have to go around at the end to the front and adjust things. If they look weird, I'm sorry. And the green grapes that I got my hands on came in smaller clusters. So I'm going to use the stem to slightly anchor it back here. Oh, there one runs away. Well, he'll be fine there. Now, as I go, I've got some more grapes. Don't despair. But I also want to work in some of these small. I'm going to slightly move my humbled fog. Some of my other dishes and such. Now, for the color of the apricots, I'm going to put these on the back. And because, actually, I don't want the crystal immediately visually next to each other, I don't want it crashing into dish to dish either, so I will use this cluster of grapes as a little buffer between them. It's very pretty. And what else? I want to use the radishes toward the outer edge. So let's go, these figs are a lighter color than the dates. And if I put the dates far in, they'll disappear. So I'm going to fill the interstices with some of these wonderful figs. And you don't have to be pedantic about it, but you want it to look opulent and inviting. If this sort of thing feels like there's not enough, like there's scarcity, people will not feel comfortable enjoying themselves vigorously. And then I will add, I've reserved 2 of those figs intentionally. Now, I will put a few of these beautiful dates over here. You notice there's no real science to this. I'm just adding things as it seems good to me. And if the quantity of these things is small enough to count, go for an odd number. It subconsciously seems more natural to the brain. These 2 figs, it's a nice idea. Yes, it's true. I said don't make a confetti of it. But if you've introduced a theme of some of these accompaniments in one place, it can be nice to echo them somewhere else. It's just a little thoughtful touch. So, back to the grapes. What do I have? I have this rather oddly shaped bunch. And what I'm going to do is divide it. I should have brought a scissor and didn't think of it. So this has a nice shape. I will tuck it back here, and if a grape, you can't see it back here and I'm getting too much around to turn. I have a couple of grapes just barely surpassing the edge of the board. In this case, it looks delicious. It looks slightly like the sauce has dripped down your lip. It's tantalizing. So good. Let it. Now these are sort of gangly. I may get a scissor and work them in, but by and large that doesn't look terribly, terribly opulent. What else? I've got a bit of a void in the middle, so I'll just drop in some figs. I'm sorry, these are not figs, these are dates. And you don't have to stack them up. You just want things to look thought of. Now, let's have some of these beautiful radishes. I'm going to put them so that their placement highlights each of their most beautiful aspect. In many of them, it's that tiny little root end. Boy, they're pretty. And see, I'm contrasting them against the cheese. Let's see. Here I've got a beautiful little white one. And that gives us a little moment there. It's a little still life. It shows all that is offered, a sampling of each. The only real rule at this point is to not make anything look overly cluttered. This one is pretty. It has a tiny little stem, and you can see it against the white marble. It's very pretty. I'm even going to put a few of them in upside down, not all together, but here and there, so you get a flash of their full color. This one you see has a tiny little graze of green. It's sort of like the end of a turnip. And I'm going to put that on the board where it can be seen because it's near enough the green grapes. It picks up the green of the grape. Thoughtfulness. Thoughtfulness. It's just like arranging flowers. You pick up every stem as you're arranging and you say, what can I do in this composition with that stem and its shape and its relationship to the bloom? You're looking and choosing and remaining flexible as you go. What else? This is looking good. I think I could stand to build it out a little in this direction. So, let's give it some walnuts, which is very pretty here. The walnut and the fig are close enough in color. They sort of become one, but when you get close you realize, there's a variety. Little pile of walnuts here. Got a little void back here, so I'll just drop some in. If the night goes such that everyone eats the apricots, you might take that dish away and then people get at what's on the inside. What else? What have we? I think the only thing I've neglected to use at all is the ginger. And I had thought about working the ginger in its ramekin. And I suppose I could, but what I will do instead is just put a little of it here and let the pieces fall out slightly. There, you don't need much. Of course, now I've got sugar all over my hands. And before we think about the other details, I take this little bit of parsley off to be thoughtful. I want to show you this, what I do with the lemon. Now, the only thing that really could maybe use it on this board is the olives. But I simply take a lemon, washed, and an old-fashioned vegetable peeler. I think this one's been around all my life. And you see what the lemon will cooperate with. In this case, it looks like it's only going to give us some small strips. Sometimes you get a firmer lemon, and it's easier. But whether you get smaller strips or one big strip, I'm going to show you what to do. Be sure you don't get the pith. I just simply put it like this through something like olives. When I find sales of high-quality jarred goods, maybe marinated artichoke, asparagus, so on, I pick them up and keep them in the pantry. And then you can put them on this sort of thing and drain them, certainly. But then when you put just a little bit, like I did, just a little bit of lemon zest, I'll put some still photos at the end so you can see. It really enlivens this. It also gives you a wonderful scent. Boy, exciting. So what do we need to serve this? Well, I advise you to go clockwise or counterclockwise, whatever you like, but pick a direction and work your way around as you add the pieces of flatware. If you don't, you'll forget something. So, always put the handles out, because that is the direction that your guests will eat from. And let's just see. I think this cheese knife would be nice there. Let's have some variety and put this cheese knife here. I'm anchoring them just under a little drip of water there, maybe off a grape. I'm anchoring the edge just under a piece of cheese. And what next? People can pick up the nuts and the dried fruit with their hand, by and large. I'm actually going to put this right on top of the gorgonzola, because I think it's pretty. And what else? I'm working my way toward the center in a spiral. I think because this Saint-Angel is the most prominent on the tray and also extremely beautiful, I'm going to use the biggest knife that I have for the whole bit. I'm just going to lean it there. I hope it will stand. It will. Also, you see, the flatware is lending its own interest to the composition. And when people arrive at your table, they see that. Now, these apricots are very sticky, so I will give them a fork. And the olives, you could certainly use a fork. Fork or spoon. You know, it's nice to go in threes, so I will give it a third of these not forks. Now, I'm a good distance around from the previous of these knives I used, so good. I will add this one. I'm going to just anchor it under the edge of that piece of Swiss. And the last, I have a very soft, the Humboldt Fog, very soft cheese. And I will see if I can just lay that cheese knife there and persuade it to stand. Maybe not, we'll see. Slight press. If it slips away, I'll put it back. And what have I forgotten? A spoon. Let's use an interesting spoon. I have a sugar spoon here. Put it right in the honey. That is beautifully thick honey. And then I'm going to look around to make sure I haven't forgotten anything. This has flatware. This has flatware. These are eaten with the fingers. Flatware, flatware. Fingers, flatware, flatware. Fingers, flatware. I think we've done it. Let me clear everything away so you can look at this unobstructed. I'll also have a look from the front and fix anything that seems odd. And we'll have a few last thoughts before I leave you to feast on your cheese board. And here we have it. Voila. The big reveal. Before we get into it, though, I thought of something I should tell you. Sometimes people ask me, what about, for anything like this, even a bigger menu on like a buffet, what about identifying the items? And in this case, people might not be able to recognize the individual cheeses. So what could they do? Well, you could certainly go online and get these little holders, but I think it's much better, probably better for the environment, if you just take something like one of these radishes. It's dry. No, it's not weeping. And make a cut, you know, I don't know, maybe, I'm making this up, but a shy 1/4 inch deep. And then have on a nice card of heavy stock the name written. And don't try to write a lot, brief, just, you know, Swiss, Saint-Angèle, Mountain Gore, G-O-R, period, for the Mountain Gorgonzola. And then you could work these into your composition with those little cards, each inserted into their own cut radish. You could do the same thing with a piece of carrot. I think that is much less elegant than presenting it like this, so I'll put that off to the side. I think this is much nicer. I like, as I look at it, that the visual weight of it is slightly off-center. So, what else? Serve it with some kind of bread, crackers. If you are in a particular dairy-loving place, particularly dairy-loving place, it is not uncommon to also serve good quality, like European salted butter, in dishes on a cheese table or cheese board. Why? Because very often people will take a rich piece of cheese like this triple cream. It is not a brie, but let's say a triple cream brie, the Saint-Angèle, a Camembert, and they will put a thick slab of butter on the top of it before they eat it. And they will do that through the whole night. So if you're in that part of the world, don't deprive them. You might even learn that you like it yourself. Serve some bread. It could be crackers. It could be crostini. It's all done the same way. Make it nice. Put it in a lined container. It can be a basket. It can be something else, as I've used here. For all the details on how I do this, go to my film on bread service on YouTube, and I will link it below. Other than that, review the points, and I'm sure I will include additional thoughts in my Substack article. And before I say goodbye and happy holiday, let's talk about how you might adapt this. This is clearly designed to be in the center of a table. It could be a round table, could be a rectangular or oval table, but everyone must be able to reach it. We already said if you've got a really long table or multiple tables, use multiple boards. But if this were a buffet, it's important to say that you would not make a 360-degree or all sides cheese board. You would cheat all the display, all the configuration, and certainly the handles of your flatware. You would cheat them to the side where people will pass to serve themselves. Now, if you have a two-sided buffet, this might be just fine. But just think about how people will eat it when you decide how you will lay it out. This is a small point, but it matters to some people a lot. If you think your olives, for example, which I drained of their brine before I put them in this bowl, if you think they look too dry, right before you serve it, just drizzle the bowl with good olive oil, like a finishing kind of olive oil that you want to eat just as it is, not really like a cooking grade olive oil. And it is good to use seedless grapes. If you want, let's say like right now, it's the fall-winter time of year, people might be inclined to use a cut fruit, like a cut apple, cut pear. This is not the time for that. If you wanted to use a dried apple or pear, that might be fine, but save the cut fruit for other purposes. They'll turn brown. They will, if you acidulate them, toss them in lemon or vinegar water, they may drip on your board or off your board. Just save those for another purpose. No cut fruit. The grapes are perfectly fine. And the freshness is nice against all the richness. What have I forgotten to tell you? The most important thing is to enjoy yourself. And there is always the question of what you might drink with it. Generally speaking, whatever you're drinking anyway, though I assume you're not drinking soda or you're not drinking lemonade, something like that, a dry white wine would be very nice. A dry, crisp white wine especially, something with a little acid that will contrast with the richness of the cheese. You could also have a beautiful red wine, but something full-bodied. I would not choose a rosé, and I would not choose something sweet, and this is not a time for claret. A full-bodied red wine, it can even be a blend. It does not have to be particularly fancy. Boy, looking at this, I'll tell you what it reminds me of. It feels like Christmas at the Naschmarkt in Vienna. And if we were there, we would probably have a flute of champagne and a big lobster tail on ice. And then we would wander through the market and have some grapes and have some cheese and some everything here, nuts and ginger. And when we've about had all we can manage, we would probably have a little more champagne. Dry champagne, not Prosecco, not Cava, and not sweet sparkling. Good, dry champagne. Maybe a sparkling Vouvray. And then we'd probably have some of that wonderful baklava that they've got there and a Viennese pastry and go to bed very happy. So if you don't know what to serve, let that sort of thing inspire you. And if you don't know, you haven't been to the Naschmarkt, look it up on YouTube. It's a world of information right there at our fingertips. What else? Good, strong black coffee would be awfully good at the end of this. And if you wanted to gear this slightly toward dessert, instead of the pickled peppers and briny olives and such, you could have paillettes of dark chocolate and maybe chocolate dipped nuts and dried fruits and things. Personally, I like to keep dessert as dessert. If you like this sort of creamy idea and you want an easy dessert, make chocolate mousse ahead. You can hold it in your refrigerator the day or two before. And after everyone is absolutely ready to collapse from their cheese board, you can give them a little chocolate mousse and they will float home happier than they've been in ages. So, you know, the holidays can be difficult. And I very candidly don't love them. But I love enjoying myself. And it is awfully rewarding to enjoy yourself with people you like. So I hope this holiday you will do that. And if this cheese board can help you, my work here is done. Thank you for following along this whole season. And follow me everywhere. Substack, Instagram, here on YouTube, Im Atherton Baber everywhere. Happy New Year. I will see you on the other side.